When you see the attacks on Venezuelan soil, do you think that that would escalate, or they're
Well,
going to continue with this sort of attacks?
I think what they're doing is precisely what I think I mentioned it to you, what they've been doing all along now for the last 15 or so years. They plant the CIA into a particular spot, and then the CIA gins up the kinetic action, the actual military action, if you will, for the SEALs or for some other special operating force. And then the SEALs or whatever Rangers go in and they do this sort of thing. So it's a combination of CIA planning, setting everything up, and then the executors are military when they come in, but they're Special Operations Command. They're not from Southern Command, they're from Special Operations Command. That seems to be what he's doing right now. They just blew up that warehouse or whatever it was in Venezuela, which really intrigues me because supposedly in that warehouse they found a bunch of cocaine. Well, my intelligence is that there's very little cocaine in Venezuela, that most of the cocaine, if it is in Venezuela at all, it's transit. It goes through quickly. And it doesn't transit by water. It transits by land to the Pacific shore, and then it's picked up and distributed that way. At any rate, I don't know what they're doing. I have no idea what they're doing, but it's dangerous. It's very dangerous. And now we have all this military force committed off the shores of Venezuela, and we have no significant strategic presence mission capability in many of the regions that we said 2 years ago were absolutely essential to have amphibious bottoms, a Marine Expeditionary Unit, or even a Marine Amphibious Group, a carrier somewhere close by with escorts, a carrier strike group. How are we doing that now? And now we're going to go to war with Iran too? This president doesn't like war. Sorry, doesn't look like that to me. It looks like he loves war. Looks like what it really looks like, Nima, is he loves killing people. That's really, I mean, you go back to his first administration when he killed several people, terrorist heads, um, leader of the IRGC, Qasim Soleimani, who was the guy he killed out in Syria, I think, Bugatti. Um,
Yeah.
he seems to like killing people. He doesn't like being accused of going to war or being a warlike president, but he likes, I think he even relishes killing people. That's what he likes to do. And this is perfect for him.
Yeah. Is there anything in the Trump 2.0 that you would say is different from what it was before during the first administration? I'm talking about
Yes.
Trump 1.0,
Yeah.
or we're getting to the same sort of conditions because the war in Ukraine is not that much changing. He's talking every time, no outcome so far.
But
China, Iran, go ahead.
I think it is different. And from my perspective, watching it here every day, I think he's grown more absurd, more aberrant, more apt to do things that are totally contradictory of themselves in the same 24-hour period. I think he's losing it to a certain extent in his mental capacity to do whatever he has to do every day. And sometimes when I watch him, it looks like he's been stimulated. So, what is he taking? What are the drugs he's taking in order to go from what looks like a very stodgy, almost flatulent old man to suddenly being fairly on his toes and speaking crisply, maybe? Is he taking something? I don't know. Uh, when would we ever know in this country if someone was taking something? Ha, we're killing people for giving us the drugs, but we don't know when our own president might be taking something. Uh, and the other thing that troubles me about this second time around, Nima, there is a coincidence approaching with an economic collapse, the likes of which no American living today has ever seen, and this leadership. And this leadership's tendency to be authoritarian, particularly with things like posse comitatus, things like the Insurrection Act, things like martial law, things like deploying the military domestically. these things are going to coincide, and we're going to have a situation in this country, economic situation, that is the worst we've probably had since the late 1800s, and maybe worse than that, far worse than 1932, 1933. And that's the excuse for an authoritarian to put the troops in the country.
Mm.
Don't even have to declare the Insurrection Act. It's just martial law to keep people from doing the kinds of things people do when they're busted flat broke and have no prospects for the future. And Trump would be looking for that kind of excuse, and he has sycophants like Rubio and Hegseth that would like to do that too. And so we come down to the point where maybe they do really badly in the midterms, or maybe they just barely squeak by in the midterms. And then this crisis hits. It could hit before the midterms, but I suspect it's going to hit after them. What do we do then when we have no legislative check whatsoever on him? Very marginal one if we do. The Republicans are waking up to a certain extent, but then you got Democrats like my senator here from Virginia, Tim Kaine. He gets approached by Ro Khanna and Tom Massey and gets asked to help with this business that they've stirred up about Epstein, and Kaine turns a deaf ear to him. Tim Kaine will never get another penny from me. He'll never get a vote. He'll never get a penny from me. Where is the power to check Trump, particularly if we're mired in a situation that they also see as a threat to their existence in the legislature? Because, go back to the bonus marchers after World War One. That was only World War One veterans wanting what they'd been promised, but they marched on Washington. And they were pretty docile. They were pretty peaceful. Only General MacArthur made them look like they were aggressive. Very stupid act on the part of MacArthur for Roosevelt. But in this case, the excuse is going to be a lot bigger, I think, because this is going to be a crisis that affects the whole country. The only people it won't affect, essentially, and one or two of them it might affect too, but most of them it won't, is the billionaires. Everybody else is going to be impacted by this crisis. So that's perfect music for Trump, especially a destabilized, getting too old Trump who has people around him like the Tom Cottons, like the Lindsey Grahams, like the Josh Hawleys, like others, apparently like Tim Kaine, who are interested in controlling everything to the maximum extent possible and will relax constitutional restrictions and laws in order to do it. And I know I sound like I'm a pessimist, a predictor of disaster and that sort of stuff, but I think we're in real economic trouble, and it's going to come to bear within the next 12 to 18 months, and it's going to hit almost every American below the 90% level, and that's going to take some really good leadership to weather, and some incredible cabinet work to weather, a good governance process to weather, and we don't have that. We don't have that. Throw on top of that all the other things that they're doing, like these strikes in the Caribbean, and like what, Haaretz this morning. Here's the headline from the online version: Trump's embrace of Netanyahu is a tactic that offers little clarity of post war Gaza. You think? You think? There's no clarity. He's still killing people. He's still killing people in Lebanon. He's still killing people in Syria. He's now angry with Erdogan. How long is it going to take before he opens a front there? And, where are we headed there? And they're all talking about the beautiful city that Trump's going to build there. And oh, by the way, Netanyahu's going to move everybody to Somaliland. Do you think a single Palestinian is going to accept a boat ride or a plane ride willingly to Somaliland? This is where we are. And Trump has engineered, at least in part, he's engineered all of this. His embrace of Netanyahu. I love that term from Haaretz. His embrace of Netanyahu. When have we not embraced that moron?
I don't know if you watch this guy who's the former speaker of IDF. He does a lot of interviews.
I think I know who you're talking about.
Yeah. His name just escaped me, but
Yeah,
he said that Turkey is growing to be the worst enemy of Israel.
he's sort of like Jacques Baud in the sense that he tells the truth.
Yeah,
By the way, someone told me yesterday from Lucerne, or I think it was Lucerne, someone I used to deal with when I was at the State Department, that Switzerland is scared to death of giving Jacques Baud a passport or getting him back into the country or standing up to the EU or whatever. I said, why is Switzerland scared of that? You don't understand. Okay, I don't understand. A little pipsqueak hiding behind its mountains with a gun in every bedroom.
yeah, it's a beautiful garden, Larry.
Yeah,
You know,
they don't want to disturb it.
yeah. What they're doing to Jacques Beau is unbelievable. I talked with him yesterday, and the situation is getting worse,
Yeah,
Larry.
that's what I heard
You
too.
know,
He
they
can't even go to the grocery store unless he's got an escort, I was told.
if anybody tries to help him and tries to buy something for him, they're not gonna be able to even buy the stuff and send them to him because it's gonna be at it's unbelievable, you know, what Europe is trying to do to Jacques Beau, who's who you
I don't
know.
think I don't think it's Europe. I think it's the leadership. I think it's the EU leadership and certain countries' leaderships, particularly Starmer. Starmer has turned into what I would call a Hitler in waiting, especially with regard to people's civil rights. He just he will not tolerate anything. I saw this morning that the young prince and the king got into a tiff. I'd love to know what that was all about
Yeah.
because I've always thought Charles was a throwback to Henry VIII, without the power, without the guts, without the courage, without the brain power. Charles is, Charles is a throwback to 400 or 500 years ago.
Yeah. The role of the United Kingdom is not, you know, is not positive in Ukraine, in the Middle East. They're trying to do, even for at least for the, you know, for the case of the Middle East, they're trying to somehow pretend that, you know, they're against what Israel is doing, but after all, we know that behind the scene they're doing
Yep,
everything to
everything
support
they can.
Israel.
They're still flying those reconnaissance flights, I'm told, sharing the intelligence with the Israelis.
You know, uh, Larry, today Netanyahu talked with Donald Trump. You've mentioned that and Donald Trump was talking about the the ballistic missile program of Iran being, you know, he agrees that Israel can attack the missile program in Iran, and he said if when it comes to nuclear program, it's going to be fast. Who does he really want Netanyahu to attack Iran? How much of what he was saying today, he was saying aftermath and during the meeting, was related to his position, to the midterm election, for example, to the what's going on domestically in the United States and what's going on domestically in Israel?
The first thing I think, and I try to think this way every time I posit, whatever it is I'm trying to determine with regard to Trump, the first thing you have to take in consideration is they are becoming desperate over Epstein, truly desperate. They don't know how to deal with it. And they know, some of them know really well, how deeply they're mired in it. I think it was 27 or 28 or 29, somewhere around there. I know I'm close. People whose names you would know, whose names I would know, are involved. And they're evenly split. He keeps trying to claim it's all Democrats. It's Bill Clinton, he says. It's, all, but it isn't. It's pretty even on both
Mhm.
sides of the political aisle. So that's terrorizing them. And it's particularly terrorizing Trump. And I'm beginning to believe, I didn't at first, I believe Tucker Carlson, I believe Judge Napolitano, and it's no slight on him to say I'm having a little bit of doubts now, because people who had known Trump earlier told me that that just wasn't Trump. That yeah, he does things around women, and he'll pat their ass, and he'll do the kinds of things that he did in the first campaign, for example, when he made that
Mm.
statement. He'll do those kinds of things, but he's not the kind of person who would do the things that are insinuated having happened with some of these people with Jeffrey Epstein. I'm beginning to change my mind about that. I'm beginning to think that some of these people are naive, the way my boss, Colin Powell, was naive about people like George Tenet and John McLaughlin, Donald Rumsfeld, Condi Rice, and others. Not that that was a naivete about their sexual peccadillos. This is a naivete about humanity and men in particular, in my view, billionaire men in particular, powerful men in particular. So I think there's quite a big bunch of Republicans in these files. And that's why Bondi and Patel are lying through their asses about this. Trump knows that, or at least he knows enough of it to be worried, seriously worried about it. And then the other thing I think they are worried about, seriously worried, because Scott Bessent is not a fool, is the briefings that he's probably giving them, as I've mentioned before, on the parlous state of our finances. The fact that we are not going to be able to pay the interest on our debt and what that's going to do. And also, there is something breaking through from Tulsi Gabbard and others um, with regard. And, you know, yesterday I was asked, do you think Tulsi Gabbard is saying what she's saying because she wants to help Trump in the negotiations with Putin? Because basically, Tulsi is more or less saying the intelligence community agrees with our assessment of what's happening in Ukraine, that Ukraine is finished, that Russia's won, get it over with, get it on, and get it done. She wouldn't be doing that, probably. I don't think. Maybe she's found some courage, maybe. But I don't think she'd be doing that unless Trump had asked her to make the intelligence as powerful as she could with regard to helping him get out of this mess in Ukraine. Um, but at the same time, I think she's telling the truth. So this is a point where
Mm.
political needs jibe with the actual genuine intelligence.
Yeah.
So if that's happening, then she's countering with the president's support, tacit at least, many other of the cabinet members who don't want, and people like Lindsey Graham and Tom Cotton and these other brain dead morons in the Congress. So I don't know where we're going with that, though, because ultimately they're all going to be derailed by Epstein and what it does to the White House, and they're going to be derailed in a significant and long lasting way by this economic crisis. So, yeah, I think it's anybody's guess how this. Uh, One person said to me the other day, how many times do you think in history you've ever had a crisis of the nature of the one confronting America today coinciding with utterly incompetent leadership? Uh, I said, well, if you're asking me about America, I don't think we've ever had that happen, not in the dimensions it's happening now. You could argue that we had that situation in 1860 until Abraham Lincoln took the oath of office, and then we had competent leadership. Um, it's hard to even find a place in ancient history. People say Nero. Well, go back and look at the Western Roman Empire. Nero might have fiddled while something burned. I'm not even sure that's true, actually. But it wasn't in that bad a shape at that particular moment. In fact, it went on for quite a bit longer. This is really unprecedented, and it's certainly unprecedented in our short history, 250 years, whatever you want to put on it, colonial, national. It's unprecedented that we've faced such a crisis with such incompetent leadership. Leadership, Nima, maybe incompetence not the right word. I'm increasingly of a mind that the leadership intends what it's doing. And that's a whole different kettle of fish. Why do they intend on destroying the country? Are they going to pick up the pieces afterwards and be even richer? What is the rationale for this? Why would they purposefully take actions all across the globe that encumber the empire to the extent that its demise is sped up, is accelerated by at least 3 decades? Why would they do that?